Welcome in to another edition of the day after. I'm your host Tommy Ashley. I'm in the dark for some reason. I need to get that fixed. Got some echoes going on. That's Buck Sanders. That's Jason Staples. Of course, we're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Let us know in the chat if anything sounds weird or the audio's not great. We'll get it figured out. Quite a hectic day in the Bowls lot. Shout out to the folks in this chat that were in that chat live from the Bowls lot, and shout out to the folks that were in the Bowls lot checking this out. Buck, I'll start to you as I always do. I entitled this Survive in Advance, and I just want to know, what is it about those fellas that come down that mountain and play North Carolina? 3 games, 3 nail-biters. Carolina gets the best of with the win yesterday in overtime, Kenan Stadium.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got an accurate answer to that question, but part of it, I think, has to do with they get pretty fired up coming down to when they play UNC, whether it's at Boone or in Chapel Hill. Either way, they're going to be pumped to play the game. And North Carolina may have too much being too cool for school. When they're facing a team, that's not a Power 5 team. They may get a case of the big head. That's the only way I can explain it. How about you?
I think I don't know. I just think that for whatever reason, whether it's internally or something, I don't know that they take App 100% serious. You wonder how, but I also think App does some things that are interesting and a little different, and we'll get into some of that. Jason, I will say this. What did I predict for the score? What was my Carolina point on the score?
I believe you had 40.
40. They got to 40. I also had App with 15. Slightly off there. Jason, just overall thoughts on Saturday evening's ball game.
Well, first of all, the good thing is that we don't have a whole lot to discuss here because Carolina went out just as expected or hoped, and took care of business early and was able to get to the bench and make this one real easy. So yeah, real glad to see that, and time to move on to the next game, right?
Absolutely. There is no North Carolina makes nothing easy. Buck, you've oftentimes called it the Lucy and Charlie Brown effect, but one thing that I do want to get in, and I think this is important, Carolina found a way to win this game with guys out, with the passing game not really being overly effective. But Omarion Hampton, I didn't call it up. I started to call it up and highlight it. Last week after the South Carolina game, somebody, and I'm not going to call them out, I'm going to call the post out, because we talk about the post, not the poster, at Inside Carolina Message Board, said that they were almost done with Omarion Hampton because he just, paraphrasing, he'd just never get it. Well, 26 carries, 234 yards, including a 68-yarder where he ran away from those guys. Pretty impressive run game performance for North Carolina on the back of Hampton, Buck.
Yes, I would totally agree with that assessment, and you highlighted it to a great extent. But Jason also always says that, like, the 2 most important positions on the football field are quarterback and defensive line. And to be able to win a game with neither one of them performing at its peak, I think that's fair to say. North Carolina can still win the game. This is the first time in 8 years North Carolina has won a game where they didn't score a passing touchdown.
Wow.
That's a pretty long stretch. So that's a positive. It's a positive that they won an overtime game, which Mac hadn't done since he's been here. He's lost all the overtime games. So to get one of those is a good thing. It's a positive. But I get the angst, that I feel and everybody else feels, because in a lot of ways, this looked like a completely different team than the one we saw last week. Just night and day difference on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, Jason, how do you attribute for that? I mean, North Carolina, I thought that App had a solid game plan on offense, got the ball out quick. One thing people are commenting a lot on the message boards is why is North Carolina playing so far off the receivers? Why not get up on them and press? Just was it a what was the reasoning behind North Carolina's inability to get those sacks, get to that quarterback? What did you see App doing, and what was North Carolina not doing?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that App was able to run the football on first down. They consistently were able to get in favorable down and distance situations, which is exactly the opposite of what happened with South Carolina. So we talked about this, that the first thing that Carolina was able to do against South Carolina was get them in, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 12, those situations where you have a favorable down and distance for the defense. That's when you're going to get your sacks. That's when you're going to get your pressure on the quarterback is going to be a whole lot different in those situations. App was able to run the football on first down with a lot of success. And then when they did throw it, a lot of it was play action and, boot type stuff and all sorts of things like that, where they were able to use Carolina's aggressiveness up front with, an extra block or two against what Carolina was doing, and then be able to get the quarterback either out of the pocket away from the rush or stepping up into a pocket where they were able to handle things. That's basically, I think the difference is that Carolina did not win first down in this game. And actually, let me look up the numbers here. If you look at first down, let's see, first down here, first down plays. App State had 38 first down plays, average gain of 5.6 yards, average rushing gain of 4.6 yards.
They're head of the chains every
Second
single
five,
time.
most of the time. Mm-hmm. Well, at that point, now you're going to have to defend both run and pass again on 2nd and 5. And then they had some success on 2nd and 5. And that means you're going to have to you're going to have to start committing your secondary players to the run as well, which they did. So now you're going to have your safeties coming down. You're going to be playing more quarters type stuff in order to get those safeties involved in the run fits and make sure that you're supporting, which means that most teams that are playing a lot of quarters are not doing a whole lot of press. Now you got Pitt that does it. You've got a few teams that are going to press out of their quarters, but most teams that play a lot of quarters are going to play a little bit more catch or off coverage. Doesn't mean you're not playing tight, but it does mean that you're trying to be careful so that you don't get a run by. And the other thing is App's got some guys that can run on the outside in terms of they're not a slow football team on the outside on the perimeter. So you have to be careful, because what you don't want to have happen is 2nd and 5. You're trying to stop the run. You press them, and all of a sudden they run by you, and that's not a guy that your corner can catch up on. And now that the scoreboard changes. What Carolina did defensively is they tried to make sure that even if App was going to run the football, that they would have opportunities. Okay, fine. It's 2nd and 5. See if you can make it 3rd and 2. Fine. Okay. Let's see if you can consistently each time down the field win 3 downs in a row all the way up the field. And that's always been Gene Chiswick's thing. And the result of it, well, middling. Carolina won a couple drives on that. They managed to get a couple stops on that and force some field goals and a couple other stops. But I think they'd like to have had a couple more wins on 2nd and third down. But if they don't win better on first down, the rest of it's moot. They're going to have to handle things better up front. And, App ran a lot of zone, inside, outside zone, but especially outside zone, where they were able to get the defensive front moving and use the defensive front's aggressiveness against it. And we're able to create some seams. You got some of the defensive ends upfield. And how many times did you see a defensive end upfield a little bit too much? Which, that's something that we were praising after last week. Look at those guys. They got upfield. They got after the passer. They created pressure. They're getting penetration. Well, that's the thing with zone stuff. that if you get a little bit too far upfield or just slightly out of that initial gap and you create that seam, all of a sudden running back just cuts inside that and you've got a lot of space. And that's what App was able to do. They're able to use Carolina's defensive front's aggressiveness against it a little bit. And they ran some true option type stuff as well. You know, the dive off of, you know, some read option and some of those other things. They were able to get some of that working, and that was the bigger concern than the passing game. That's where this game stayed competitive.
Buck, your take, sort of expound on that. I felt like Nate Noel could play for anybody, and he looked really good at times. But Buck, your thoughts on what Jason said? I think the last part of them having some success in the middle of the field and up the gut allowed them to do all the other stuff. North Carolina's defense, fans want aggressive. Well, when you're unable to stop certain things, that aggression, as Jason said, turns against you a little bit. Found a way to make a couple plays. I mean, the interception that Aguilar threw, I'm not sure what he saw there, but Buck, your take on the North Carolina defense, specifically the defensive front that were so good last week. And you're muted. Gotcha.
Yeah, got me. I don't think it's certainly the disparity between what they did last evening and what they did last week against South Carolina makes it pretty glaring. I think we're a little bit more in the mood to criticize the defense because of what we saw last week. So I think that's at work to some degree, because if you look at it, they held Aguilar to like 51% completion rate. You take that every game against a passing game. Some of the other stuff that they were doing, they were just able to do because that's what they do. I mean, you got to just give them credit. But I don't think the defense was as much below what the standard that they set at South Carolina, as much as we would like to think that. I think it's glaring because of what they did last week. 9 sacks and 16 tackles for loss, no sacks, 5 tackles for loss. The difference is so glaring that I think it's a little easier to bang on the defense than maybe what they deserve.
Yeah, Jason, are they a victim of their own success in week one? And is some of the angst that folks are thinking about and talking about, is that coming out from last year as well? And we're talking with Jason Staples and Buck Sanders here on the day after Inside Carolina's preeminent live show on Sunday mornings. Folks have offensive questions. We'll talk about the offense after the break. But, Jason, victim of own success or some structural issues that are still out there for North Carolina? And shout out to Sherrell McMillan for being in the chat. Said he thought Evans and Rucker were pretty good yesterday. Jason, your take?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, the fact is the defense gave up 6 fewer points in this game, and that's including overtime, than they did in the fourth quarter against the same team last year. So let's have some perspective here.
You're not lying.
Right? So through 4 quarters plus overtime, you still gave up 6 fewer points against this team than you did last year. That I would consider significant improvement. And the thing is, they were close on a lot of plays in this game. The same thing that happened against South Carolina. They were close to some really big stops. I mean, you think about the little pop pass on 4th and 1, for example.
Yep. Guy just made a play.
They made a play, and Ced Gray has both hands in there on the football, and their guy just still caught it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you got to give credit. The other team's on scholarship too. So that's part of it. And to me, the biggest thing that this defense still needs to get on that front is they've got to learn to finish. Yep. They've got to play after play. They're close on a lot of things. They've got to finish. Now, they did finish at the end there. There were some things that they did at the very end where they were able to get a stop and get a couple things going at the end that were the difference. Force a field goal instead of a touchdown, and then in the second overtime, force a stop, a total stop. So, they took care of business when the chips were down and actually did get some stops. But there are just a few plays where it's like, man, that guy, he's just slightly out of position. They need to be a little bit more disciplined with their eyes, some different things. And I thought App did a good job of putting some guys in conflict, of scheming to, okay, we're going to get this guy going in motion. We're going to, run a shallow cross with this guy. And then he's with the outside receiver. And then we're going to bring, an inside player on a little H slip. And we're going to take advantage of the aggressiveness following that inside action. That guy's got to stay out there. He's not going to be out there. Easy toss in for the touchdown. Things like that where a guy comes in 2 yards too far. And just because of that over aggression or just playing fast gets slightly out of position. There were a lot of those little things. I thought they did a good job of creating conflict with players' eyes and scheming to make some things difficult for North Carolina. Now, you'd still like to see Carolina win more up front against the running game. You'd like to see the backers. I thought this was a game where really both backers, but in particular, one of the backers had a little bit of a tougher time in this game. I thought they took advantage of some things in terms of backers and their fits versus some pass responsibilities and all of that. This was a hard game for the back seven in that respect. And I thought the backers had a little bit of trouble. But yeah, I think this is a little bit of a victim of first week success. I think it is also a factor of, PTSD against App State. And App State has continued to play North Carolina year after year closer than that game probably should be if you look at, line up the two rosters and go talent for talent. But fact is, defense got stops when they needed to, and the offense won the football game at the end. They were able to put the ball in the end zone. So, well, you got to win against a team that prepared obviously very hard for you, and a team that is not an easy team to play. One of the better group of 5 teams against Power 5 opponents in the last few years. And I think it's time to go ahead and let them play other teams from in-state for a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. North Carolina wins 40-34 over App State. I think it was down on our end, in student section end. It was at 3rd and 19 or something App had, and basically a giveaway play by them, and Carolina gets a 15-yard face mask. That's a tough play. That's a momentum-changing play there one way or another. Guy just trying to make a play and gets hold of the face mask. Buck, standouts for you on the defensive side. I thought it was interesting that DJ Jones was in there at the star. We talked about, was he ready for that? Huzzie pushed to the outside, his normal or more comfortable spot. Standouts for you defensively, Buck, before we move it on down the road.
Well, I think Huzzie definitely in the back end was a standout in this game. No question about that. I think he was involved like in almost all the plays in that last drive or whatever when Appalachian was trying to get ahead in the overtime. So Huzzie, a big plus there. I really don't know I'd have to, because I'm not going to pull a coach and say I'll have to go look at the tape, but I have to go look at the tape on
I'm not going to say it, but I'm going to say it.
Right. But is Marcus Allen really that good, or do people just not like throwing at him for some reason? They prefer to toss it to the receiver on Huzzie's covering. I don't get that. You don't hear Marcus Allen's name called, which in a lot of cases for a cornerback, that's a good thing, right? That not to have your name called. But they don't seem to be completing anything on his side of the field. So I'd like to go to the tape and see what I can see there. But I agree that with Jason that the linebackers had a mixed game, but the front seven altogether, they had, not trying to put lipstick on a pig, but they had 9 quarterback hurries, which is a good number. Appalachian State only had 5 for the game, so it's not like they weren't putting pressure on their quarterback. They just weren't getting there. And we've seen this happen before with UNC a little too often. But I just think at this point, it's a little too soon to start nudging the North Carolina defense in the direction of the bus that's coming down the street. So
that's a great line.
I'm going to keep my powder dry for now about the defense.
That's a good. Don't nudge the defense quite yet to the bus that's coming down the street. Man, the man has a way with words, folks. That's Buck Sanders. Jason, standouts on defense. Talk to Bucks Point, and I'm looking at the official stats. I assume Marcus Allen 3 pass breakups. Kamen Rucker 3 hurries. Those numbers are solid in the game, and especially if you want to look at it is in terms of last season. Marcus Allen with 3 breakups. I'm sure I'm wrong, and somebody will prove me wrong. I don't remember too many corners last year having that on their resume in a game. But, Jason, standouts on defense for you. What did you think of Huzzie going back to corner and DJ Jones getting in there?
Well, I thought that was the right call given how much App State wanted to go with bigger personnel and run the football. They wanted somebody in there who was a little bigger, a little closer to a backer safety hybrid than a corner hybrid, and or just a true corner really. And it made a lot of sense to do that. And you're putting your best corner in his best spot, so makes a lot of sense. Now the thing is, when they did start to target that slot, they put Huzzie back in there and said, okay, look, if you're gonna put a slot receiver on the field and continue to target him, you're gonna have to target our best guy. And Huzzie ended up on the day they threw 41 passes. Huzzie was targeted on 12 of them.
Yeah,
and success rate was not good. There were 12 targets of Huzzie for 5 receptions, 34 yards, and an NFL passer rating of 49. That's getting
that guy
it done
can
as
play.
a coverage player.
Yes.
Right. So that's a guy that stood out to me. I thought Rucker was still really good in this game. He created a lot of pressure. He's a guy that I thought was really, really good. And the thing is, he created pressure despite the fact that there were a number of times where they would go play action, or they would, in their protection, they'd have a 6-man protection against a 4-man rush, or a 5-man protection against a 4-man rush, and they'd use that 5th guy to chip Rucker.
Mm-hmm.
Or to, Rucker would break past an offensive lineman, and then he'd have a back right in his face. So, he created some problems. And I thought Des Evans played a good game. He was another guy that flashed quite a bit in this game and really deserves some credit for playing well. I thought he created pressure as a pass rusher. I thought by and large he was pretty good setting the edge, not great, but pretty good, and handled himself well. So, I think those would be the first 3 guys that stood out to me as having handled themselves and deserving some notice for playing well in this game. You also got to give Tayon Holloway some credit. I mean, he was only targeted 3 times, but managed to get a win on 2 of them. So nice bounce back from a guy that got picked on a little bit last week, even though he was in good position. He was a solid 3rd corner in this game when you had all 3 on the field. So you feel pretty good about the corners in the back 7, and I thought the edge players in general played pretty well.
Yeah, I think North Carolina, App State always makes it weird against Carolina, and I think there's a lot to see at first blush that creates a lot of that angst. And to y'all's point, it's not as bad as it seems sometimes against App. Buck, last questions or last thoughts on the defense before I flip the page. We're going to talk about special teams in this one because a lot of people have some special teams questions, and obviously a missed field goal late made it quite interesting, and then some other issues perhaps, and then the offensive discussion. But anything left on the defense, Buck? You said keep them out of the bus lane. It sounds like I agree with you, actually.
Well, that's good to know. If the two of us agree, then it must be so, right? The one thing that I would encourage the on the beat guys to do, or the game plan folks to do, actually, is, and Jason, you bear some responsibility here too. You have to keep the word blowout out of Greg Barnes's mouth.
Because whenever he says it, it's the exact opposite.
Yes, it's Virginia Tech. You'll remember the blowout that was going to be. If he starts, putting his lips in, forming his lips into the word blowout, then you need to hit the brakes on him. Other than that, we can move on.
Jason, you want to get in here? I want to point out a couple questions. People are asking about the soft press coverage or the soft coverage. Sort of go into that too a little bit, and then close the defensive side of the ball with your point.
Yeah, I didn't have any problem with how they chose to cover schematically. It was perfectly fine. They covered pretty well on the night. I mean, it was not like they got lit up in the passing game. They handled themselves pretty well. I just don't think that's a major criticism that's worth making. Go watch everybody else in the country and take a look at how often you're seeing, press man every play. It's just that's not modern football. You're gonna get press man from some teams. You're gonna, and again, depends on philosophy a little bit there. You're gonna get some from some, but more often you're going to get maybe the boundary corner in press and the other two playing off. You're going to get, some combinations, and you're going to get a lot of different coverage variation. That's just the modern game. And I know that doesn't feel as aggressive, but you can be pretty aggressive in those cases. And I like, seeing press as much as anybody, but the reality is that's just not what you're going to see as often in modern college football. And you don't even see it at the pro level as much as you used to. So quick numbers here to wrap on. These are Carolina's pass rush win percentage rates. So Kamen Rucker had a win percentage rate of 33%. So what that means is you're looking at every time he rushed the passer, he had a 1 in 3 shot of just blowing by or beating the blocker in front of him. That's pretty good. And the pressure rate that he had, 12.1. That's solid, right? He had three quarterback hits and 5 hurries on 33 pass rush snaps. That's real good. Now, here's the real positive to take away on top of that is he wasn't the only one. These are good numbers from Des Evans too. 27% win percentage and a 7% pass rush rate, those are both higher numbers for him than he's shown in the past, certainly than he had last year. So look, if you can get good performance, continue to get good performance from your edges in that case, that is going to pay off, game after game.
Yeah, and Jason covered the press coverage thing. A lot of people are saying, well, why are they playing off 11 yards when the line's, 10 to gain? Mac even mentioned he felt like they were too soft on the back end. We'll see how it
should play 8. I think most people are looking at it and going 11. I think it usually was 8. Sometimes it's 8, and then what you do is you pedal out of that a little bit. So it might end up at 11, but the whole point is to be able to drive on the underneath stuff. That's why you do it. So you play at that deeper spot because you really have a choice. You can either play right up on the line of scrimmage and play press man, or you can play 8 yards off. What you can't do is play 4 or 5 yards off, because then you're in no man's land, because the receiver can get on you so fast and you're not in position to get a good jam. So now you're in the worst case scenario. So what you'll see is most teams will default to 7-8 yards off for off coverage, and then it's a matter of how much do you backpedal, how much do you give ground at the snap, and the whole point is you don't want to have to leave your back pedal. You'd rather stay in your pedal, or some teams teach a weave rather than a pedal, but you want to keep your hips facing the line of scrimmage as long as possible without having to flip and take off vertical. And if you play a little bit softer on that, then a lot of routes are breaking at your standard 3-step type drops, or your 1-step in gun. Your shorter routes are breaking at 5-6 yards. Your medium routes, your traditional 5-step drops, are breaking at between 8 and 11 yards, right? Well, what that does is if they're breaking at 5 yards and you're playing at 9 by the time you're pedaling, you never have to get into your turning your hips and running with the receiver. And so you can drive on that stuff straight downhill, and it's more aggressive. If you're playing at 5 yards, when he gets to 5 yards, you've got to turn and run. Because if he keeps going, well, you better keep going. If you stay in your pedal, you're done. So you play it in your pedal or in your weave, and then drive downhill and try to separate the football, or try to break it up coming downhill. And then if it's a longer thing and they get to 8-9 yards, you're still not necessarily having to pop. You're only having to pop on your deeper stuff, which that's the point. Is okay, deep drop, deeper route where he's still running vertical at 9 yards. Well, I better pop my hips and go. That's the point, and it allows you to play aggressively downhill. That's why teams play at that yardage. Now, do I think at times they did get a little bit soft, especially on, say, 3rd down and all that? There are a few 3rd downs where I'd like to have seen them a little tighter, but that's something that they can continue to clean up as they get into the season.
Yep, indeed. There it is. That's the explanation. We, of course, will hear from Matt Brown, Gene Chizik, and Chip Lindsey on Monday. Going to take a second to talk about Johnny T-shirt, as it is the mid portion of the show. Support them. Saw a lot of Johnny T-shirt gear in the Bowls lot. And in the Bowls Lot deck yesterday. And, of course, they're sponsors of this show, All Inside Carolina podcast, and friends of the Inside Carolina premium subscribers. Anybody in the chat not a premium subscriber? There's 520 of you guys in the chat. Are you not a premium subscriber? Get it done. Check out that, and you get the Johnny T-shirt 10% off. They've got everything you could possibly need for any Carolina fan in your life, yourself, family, friends, You got friends that lose a bet on a game and they got to have some Carolina gear. Johnny T-shirts got it for you. Let the national guys pay the bills. It's the day after Carolina 40, App State 34. Okay, guys. Drake Maye portion of the show. Buck Sanders, you're up. I thought Drake took a big shot there at the end, and I remember Mac saying last year, we don't want him doing that unless the game's on the line. The game's on the line, and he caught one there. But how'd you think Drake played? We'll get to the running game in just a second.
I've been pondering this a good bit this morning, and Jason can answer this question probably better than I can, but what about having a new left tackle, first-time starting left tackle, how much did that have to do with the play calling and the way that they approached the game? What kind of plays they could call? It would be hard for me to imagine that they would put Diego Pounds out at left tackle for the first time ever in a game and play him 79 snaps and not somehow modify what they're doing in their play calling. And certainly they did a lot more in the run game than they normally do, and due to Amorian Hampton in great extent. But I do think probably that Diego Pounds is at this point of his offensive line career is a much better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. And if that's the case, you might want to be able to lean into that running game while he's getting acclimated to the whole process. That's one of the things that makes me wonder about the comments that we make about the game that Drake had or didn't have, or anything else. Shouldn't his performance and the performance of the entire offense in many ways be viewed through that lens? I think it just changes a lot to have a raw left tackle out there protecting your quarterback's backside.
There you go, Jason. Follow up with that. Diego, 79 snaps against the App. They had some faith somewhere. I know Montelis was down and out of the game, so they had to make a move there. But your thoughts on how Diego played and how that affected A, play calling, B, success, both passing and throwing?
I thought he played pretty dang well.
And that bodes well for North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to play better guys on the edge for sure. But what I saw from him yesterday tells me, yeah, that's probably your left tackle for the rest of the year, and you can feel comfortable with William Barnes inside. And I don't think it's so. I'm gonna play devil's. Well, no, I'm gonna take a risk here and go the opposite direction of El Jefe here. I think the way that this affected the play calling was not about Diego Pounds' limitations. It was about the fact that with Pounds at left tackle and with William Barnes at right guard, they were a more imposing offensive line and better able to run the football than they would have been otherwise. And if you can run the football for 10 yards a carry,
why would
you do other things?
Yeah.
I mean, I see people, I saw somebody in the chat earlier say, only, who can hold Drake Maye to 200 yards passing? Only Chip Lindsey, as though that's a criticism. Guys, they won the game and they ran the football for, how many yards? What was the total on the
319?
Let me look at this. Let's see.
319.
Yeah, 319. Look, if you run the football for 319 yards, do you know what the actual rate of winning the game is? I mean, I don't know the actual number, but I can tell you it's pretty high.
Yeah.
Right? If you run the football for 300 plus yards, you're not losing a lot of those games. And I saw the number earlier this week. I think until the Duke game last week, Clemson over the past decade or whatever it was like 108-0 when they passed for 200 and rushed for 200. Right? If you run for 300 and pass for 200 or vice versa, there's almost nothing to complain about. Right? Yep. I mean, if you're talking about that, I'm looking at this. Omarion Hampton, 26 carries for 234 yards, average 9 yards a carry.
Run the damn ball.
I've got that.
You don't get that in most cases from passing yards per attempt, passes per attempt.
I mean, you're generally, a really good pass yards per attempt. And, Drake Maye last year, we can look this up, but Drake Maye last year was somewhere around 9 yards an attempt, which is just otherworldly good. If you're getting 9 yards an attempt in the run game, well, I'm old school here. If I can run the football for 9 yards an attempt, I'm not doing anything else.
Yep.
I'm just lining up and I'm imposing my will. And I'm going to pound and pound and pound and pound until you do something else that makes me want to do makes me want to do something else. And periodically, I might drop back with a play action where I feel like, okay, you're starting to cheat up, you're starting to do something. All right, now I'm going to make you pay. And they did, by the way. J.J. Jones had that 57-yarder that looked real nice. Drake Maye off play action. There you go, wide open. All day to throw because they're focusing on the run game. You had a 57-yarder there. You had a couple others that were in the play action area where they had some opportunities. But I think this was less about the limitations that they felt they had up front in terms of play calling, and more about they started the game running the football, and they had so much success running the football that they said, well, we decided we were going to be balanced this year, and if a team's just going to focus on stopping Drake Maye and give us 300 rushing yards in a game, well, that's winning football. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is not to get Drake Maye. I mean, if you talk to Drake Maye and you talk to this team and you ask them, what's your goal for this season? They're not going to say, let's win Drake Maye the Heisman. Let's make sure Drake Maye has enough stats to win the Heisman. That's not the goal. The goal is to win the game, to win games. And, I'm looking at the drive chart here.
While you're looking at that, how many times did Carolina throw the ball in overtime? Nary.
They didn't need to.
Exactly.
And
that's also a characteristic of a Gus Malzahn offense. If they're doing something you can't stop, Malzahn just keeps doing it. That's just one of the characteristics.
Yeah, and that's by the way a characteristic of good offensive coordination in general. There's no need to get too cute. There's no need to vary for the sake of variation, right? You go with balance. You become balanced when you have to, because teams start to take away what you're doing. If they never take away your first option, just keep running it.
Yep, and that is exactly what people complained about last year. Is Carolina's offense got too cute when it mattered. I didn't see any cuteness yesterday. Didn't see any cuteness against. Well, there was a couple. Yes, the Wildcat thing we can talk about. But
yeah, I mean, they ran Wildcat on one play and then another direct snap on the other. This is a pet peeve of mine, by the way. Wildcat is a specific type of direct snap to the quarterback, right? That's unbalanced line with jet sweep action. If it's just direct snap to a quarterback, it ain't Wildcat. They only did one Wildcat, but they got stopped on both direct snaps. And, that I think if nothing else, this game took on a completely different complexion after those first two drives where they got stopped on downs on the first direct snap, right? Where you had a missed tackle on the edge, or a missed block on the edge, where essentially your tackle's blocking down. You need one of those tight ends. They had two tight ends outside there. They had one on the line and then one in the sniffer. One of those guys needs to step down with the offensive tackle to prevent any penetration. And if that happens, Hampton's got enough space, most likely gets the first down on fourth down. You get that fourth down, you keep running downhill, and you score on that first drive. 7-3. Then the next drive, they get stopped on 3rd and 1 on another. It was another bust on just a miss in terms of how that assignment went on Wildcat. That was the Wildcat one with Hood at quarterback. If they just take care of business on those on the 4th and 1 and 3rd and 1, this game's completely different, right? Because now you're 14-3 or whatever after the first two drives. Each team has had its first two drives, and I think they're off and running with a very nice, healthy lead the rest of the way, and they can kind of coast by getting stopped on those first two drives, and then of course App scores on the next one. Now you're playing from behind, and the perception in this game changes pretty significantly, and also the way that App is able to play changes. You put App behind in this game early. You put them down, say 14-3. And this is something we talked about in the Game Plan podcast. Get up on them early, force them to start to throw the football, force them to play into what you want to do defensively. And this game changes. They weren't able to do that because of those first couple misses. And you got it. But look at the drive chart. After those first two drives, touchdown, field goal. They got the ball with like 20 seconds left, so half. So let's throw the half out, right? Mm-hmm. Touchdown, field goal, touchdown, field goal, touchdown. They scored on 5 straight drives after those first two. Then punt, field goal missed, that was
brutal,
not pretty. And then touchdown. So on their last 7 drives of the game, They scored 5 times. And if you then go to overtime, their last 9 drives of the game, they scored 7 times.
What more can you ask for?
Finish a couple of those, that were field goals and with touchdowns, and that's what you could ask for. But, I mean, geez, you run for 9 yards a carry and you score on 7 of your last 9 drives. I honestly, if I'm looking at that, I feel pretty good about it. Just turn those couple field goals into touchdowns. It would be my big bugaboo.
Yeah, Buck, I think Jason's point about the goal is not to win Drake Maye the Heisman, the goal is to win the football game is certainly valid. I would believe Drake would agree with it 100%. But I do want to ask one last question on the offense, and shout out to the 500 plus that have stuck with us. I'm going to get to the special teams. I promise I'm going to ask that question. Yes, I was asking that same question during the game. Wide receivers for North Carolina. And, of course, tight ends can be included in there, and Copenhagen was severely limited. But, Buck, is there any concern for you watching this wide receiver group as far as somebody that can stretch the field and all? J.J. Jones had that nice, I guess it was a deep end of some sort, but – is there any concern there for you in this offense? If they run the ball for 300 and some odd yards a game, it doesn't matter, or it won't matter too terribly much. But wide receiver play, issue or non-issue at this point?
Here's what I would say is that I think they need to find someone on the roster. If it's a young guy that's going to make mistakes, you may just have to bite the bullet on that is capable of taking the top off of a defense. And unless you have that guy on the field, you're going to, be limiting what Drake can do and what the offense can do. The other parts of it concern me less, which is the tight end room and the fact that they only had 1 catch this week is somehow meaningful. I think it parlays back into what Jason said about they're running the ball for 9 yards a carry, and so they just kept doing that, and which is I think what happened. And in that particular case, you're not going to get as many different people the ball. I mean, I think I don't remember how many receivers it was. I think 7, but 4 of them only had 1 catch each. So he relied on the 3 receivers the entire night. And that seems, from a Drake Maye perspective, if you're looking at his body of work, that's a lot of tunnel vision going on there for Drake, because normally he's going to have at least 9 guys with and go a little bit deeper with guys with multiple catches. So I do think that one aspect of the offense, even though you're running the ball for 9 yards a carry, you're going to have the impact of making the other side, the passing side, look not as good, right? So now I guess that's where I'm at with what happened. But they do need to try to find that guy that can make defenses respect what they can do deep. And Drake Maye is such a great thrower of the deep ball, relative to other college quarterbacks. You need that guy.
I wonder who that guy could be if he were able to play, which makes it tougher. People call it saying, is that a distraction for North Carolina? Players play. They got to get up, play. Well, it's good to see Nate McCollum get a little play in there, 1 play for 8 yards. Pacewar 8 catches, Jones 5 catches, Blackwell 4. Jason, I know exactly what you'll say on that regard. So let me ask the question that is probably the most asked question in the chat. Anybody got a guess?
Special teams.
First of all, can Carolina find a kicker that can kick? Well, Mac talked about the inconsistency in the place kicking in preseason camp. And, I don't know if I've ever seen – well, actually I have, because I've been watching ACC football a long time. They will ice a kicker. If you have no timeouts, don't worry. They will ice them for you. I wondered the faith in that ball going through the uprights especially after Coe kicked the first one. But Jason, fair catching everything on kickoffs. People are all over it. People want to know an explanation. It's a free 25 yards for the most part. Your thoughts there, maybe? Is that something, we talked about having guys just catch the ball. But anyway, your thoughts there to answer the chat.
On punts, it's all about just catching the ball.
Yep.
First and foremost, catch the football. How many games get impacted each week by a muff punt, right? I mean, and then even beyond that, how many games get impacted by the hidden yardage you leave on the field when a punt, bounces and rolls 20 yards, right? That's 2 first downs.
And you saw that last week with Huzzie catching everything, probably saved Carolina 40 or 50 yards.
Huzzie's got incredible hands. Just watching him catch the football and the run and all that. But on the kickoff, there are a couple things that you coach guys to do. Number one is you have a structure for your kickoff return where it's supposed to go. And if they kick it in the wrong spot in terms of where you're trying to get, sometimes you got a right return on or different things, and they kick it to a spot where it's just going to be difficult to get there, then you fair catch that, number one. You have a primary returner too, right? So, Petaway is the guy that they're setting this up to go to more. But both guys can return it. That's fine. But you're more inclined to get your number 2 returner to fair catch that. And then the third thing is you're telling guys to measure it not only on where the ball lands, but how high was the kick. So if it's a really high kick, you tell them to fair catch it, because that's given the coverage team a long time to get downfield. So you might catch it on the 12 and you're like, well, geez, I mean, if it's that short of a kick, you should go. Yeah. But if the kick was way up in the air and it lands on the 12, you're going to have guys 6-7 yards away from you, and you're probably not going to be able to get to the 25. And the numbers on this in terms of expected value of starting drive position, the 25 is a pretty good spot for the offense. And it's significantly better, more significantly than you might expect. The numbers are pretty robust on this. The difference between getting the ball on the 25 and getting it on, say, the 18, pretty significantly different in terms of overall offensive success and overall chances of a team winning. Now, I would like to see, Petaway, if he does get some opportunities, I'd like to see him take some opportunities to return it. He's got the wheels to be a threat, but you have to be judicious on when you choose to return it. And there's maybe one case in this one where I would have liked to have seen him return it, and I did think they could have been in a little bit better position to catch that last one, which they kicked short. I would have liked to have seen him be able to catch that and advance it rather than, make a sliding catch, which also had me a little bit, the coach in me is going, oh, son, I'm just glad you caught it.
Yeah, really. That's one of those ones that's like, oh.
Yeah. But I do actually want to go back just for a second to the wide receiver discussion. I think something else that needs to be considered in this is it's not just about the distraction that you're dealing with Tez Walker not playing, and also McCollum not playing so far. Thing you got to remember, and I was talking to Ben about this, chatting with him about this last night after the game. Chip Lindsey and that whole offensive staff planned all off season to have Tez and McCollum as your 1 and 2 wide receivers that you would feature in the passing game. Right? You came into the year and even through camp, you were practicing with Tez and McCollum as the guys that are going to be, you're going to run your passing game through those guys primarily. And you're really setting up, we're going to run the football, and then we're going to be able to throw over the top to that guy. Mm-hmm. Run, play action, touchdown. Get one-on-ones with McCollum and, let him run. And all of a sudden, you don't have those guys. And you don't have the game breaker on the field. And this is something, Buck, you were saying, that you've got to have the guy that can take the top off the defense. It's not just that. You got to have guys that are able to make big plays, even when it's not over the top, but a guy that catches it on the run a little bit and just can run away from the corner on an in route or whatever. Guys that are not going to get caught. And that's the thing. Tez Walker is not going to get caught from behind by a whole lot of guys. Right? McCollum is a guy that not going to get caught from behind a whole lot. Neither guy has really played. So I do think that's a huge factor in terms of the overall passing game. I mean, Drake Maye, 21 of 30 for 210 yards. That's a solid outing. If you look at what he did and what they asked him to do, 6.7 yards per attempt, that's okay, but you're looking at, again, 21 of 31, so almost 70% in terms of completion percentage. His overall adjusted completion percentage, so accounting for drops, 79.3. The dude played really well. But in terms of what was done with each of those catches, there was not a whole lot of room in terms of, yards after catch and all that. And this was an offense that they're still adjusting to what they have. If there's something that they're adjusting to right now, I don't think it's so much pounds at left tackle in terms of limitations. The adjustment is they're still figuring out who they are offensively as a passing offense without Tez and without McCollum so far. But with once McCollum gets back, I do think that helps stabilize that a good bit, because now you've got, I think, one more guy that, can kind of be a big play guy in the passing game.
Looking at Drake's thing, he threw the ball 5 times on third down, if my math is correct. 5 times out of 30 on third down. We've talked about mixing it up and doing it a little differently. North Carolina gets the win. I see some comments in the chat. How can the staff not be prepared if Walker, knowing Walker was ineligible, we're not going there? I mean,
I'm not saying they were unprepared. I'm just saying that the plan.
Yeah, it's like, I know we've got a long drive. I'm still not liking not having the fast car to do it, and they're getting used to it. And so North Carolina gets the win. Buck, I'll let you close us out real quick. I know your column's coming down. The Buck Stops Here will be up shortly as well on InsideCarolina.com. And be sure to check out all the content from Adam, Jeremiah, and Evan. Everybody just killing it. Michelle helping with the photos. Jim Hawkins out there taking the photos, and the entire Inside Carolina team. Another successful coverage day, and it's only beginning for the week. Buck, final thoughts. Carolina gets the win against App State. I said a win is a win is a win, and never play that team again. I think I like that idea because, there's only so many It does, but there's only so many cardiac visits you can have watching North Carolina and App State. Buck, close us out.
Well, I think my friend Parhill, who writes on gives his viewpoint on the message boards the day after a game. This morning he said something I really agree with, which I agree a lot with him. But anyway, that this is not a game that UNC normally wins. Mm-hmm. The normal outcome of a game like this is North Carolina being in the losing column. Like I started out the show by saying, this is a first time they've won an overtime game in the Mac Brown era, most recently to NC State last year. So there are a lot of things about this game that are legitimately questionable outcomes and performances and decision making on a lot of people's different part. I think a lot of that's completely valid, and it is something that if you're a football fan, a UNC fan, you should question, right? I mean, that's goes with the territory. So that would be my only thought, is to just keep in mind, bear in mind, and this is not saying a W is a W is a W, but it's a W. And so I think that's how we could just sum it up right there.
I agree with you, Buck. Jason, I will allow you for one last advanced stat that North Carolina fans need to be mindful of when thinking about this one.
Yeah. So one of the things that is worth thinking about here is Carolina averaged 6.9 yards per play. App State 5.8, and they had a turnover as well. You take those numbers, and that's normally like an 85% win expectancy. I'm going off the top of my head here. I didn't look it up exactly, but it's about that. So it was a significant anomaly that this game went to overtime. And when the advanced box score stuff, with the analysis comes out from the usual suspects, Bill Conley and some of these other guys that do this. When those advanced box scores come out this week, you're going to see the comment of, well, this should have been a comfortable North Carolina win based on the numbers, but somehow managed to go into overtime. This is a game that, if you played it, this is different from last year, right? If you play this game, you run this back multiple times with the way that Carolina ran the football, with the overall yardage gap and all of that, and just the number of third down conversions that were needed from one side. I think Carolina should feel better about this win than it probably feels on the front end. So, I think that overall those numbers speak to Carolina having played better as a whole and just needing to win some key situations and finish a little bit better.
Yep. The only number that matters in the end is the scoreboard. Carolina gets the win, goes to 2-0. That's Buck Sanders. That's Jason Staples. I'm Tommy Ashley. We've been sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt. It's been the day after. Be sure to check out VIP and Shot later today and first thing in the morning, and the rest of the Inside Carolina team coverage all week as North Carolina and Minnesota play at 3:30 next Saturday in Kenan Stadium. Gentlemen, as always,